This
Michael, can you hear me?
conference will now be recorded.
Oh my God. Can you hear me properly now? Can everyone see what I'm saying? Can someone respond?
Yes, we can hear you, Peter.
Yeah. Can you see it, yeah?
Yes, we can see it as well.
All right, well, thanks for the quick intro, Michael, and thanks for stealing some of the thunder by telling people about what the railway is as part of the presentation. Cheers, mate. Thank you for the PWI for inviting me along, or should I say Mike Barlow for introducing me to the subject and telling me that I had to do it at one point in my career. Thanks, Mr. Barlow. I hope everyone is well in this environment that we're in at the minute with COVID. It's not an easy thing to do. Even this is a bit bizarre, presenting through a screen, sitting home with a dog looking at us saying, I'm hungry, time to feed me. Sorry, dog, but you're going to have to wait. And lastly, I'm going to apologise for keeping everyone from the last out or a beer or pop opportunity that you've got prior to the next lockdown. I'm very aware that as from tomorrow, it's going to be difficult for everybody. Anyway, so as Michael said, I'm Peter Cowens. I am the Civil Built Environment and Permanent Way Engineering Executive for East West Rail. Very long job title. As my career progresses, I seem to get a longer and longer job title, which doesn't help when you've got a thick Geordie accent. Saying that, if anyone can't understand me, please write a message in the message bar and I'll try and speak more slowly and not pronounce my vowels. Right, so this is what the presentation is going to be about. I'll give you a little introduction about who I am. I know Michael said a little bit there, but I'll give you a little bit about that. Talk to you a little bit about what the project is or what the program is. Tell you a little bit about the East West Rail Company and who we are and what our role is and objectives are. Then I'll cover a bit about the role of engineering. Obviously, that's where I sit and what we're doing. And then at the end, we will take some questions. So a bit about me. I started, as Michael said, 2002, shoveling ballast and pushing Iron Men up hills and stuff like that, man and boy P-way. Went through all the maintenance gang roles as trackman, leading trackman, chargeman, supervisor. I then moved into renewals as a tech. So I've done some of the technical sides of the renewals, such as monitoring dig depth and all those things that you'd guess that is involved with that. Following that, I went back to Network Rail as a workforce development specialist. So I was a trainer for the apprentices for 2 years, and that covered all the main competencies in the P-way. I moved out of that into a principal technical officer's role in Network Rail in Anglia, soon promoted to ATME. Then I moved across to Transport for London as a technical engineer, ended up a track quality and mechanised maintenance manager, which is similar to the route on track machine engineer's role in Network Rail. From there, I then decided that because I hadn't been a section manager or a TME, even though I'd been exposed to it, I'd go and give that a go. So I did them type of roles for a bit with London Underground. And then I had I would say it's a rare opportunity, and it's in theme of the subject that I'm talking about, is going to Rail for London Infrastructure, which is the maintenance organisation that's taken over or getting the handover of Crossrail when it's ready. It wasn't ready when I left, so I'm not going to say much more about that. However, if you're interested in that subject, please do get in touch. I'm happy to talk about my experiences that, and along the lines of setting up a new maintenance organisation, coming up with maintenance tasks and preparing for the whole maintenance of the new railway. And then I ended up with East West Rail. Basically, I went from working on very, very old railways to newer railways to railways that weren't even finished yet to one that's at a concept stage. So I've travelled back in time on the railway, but in the future of my career. So that's me in a nutshell. I've been here for about 8 months. Yeah, I'm not spoiling anymore. But what is East West Rail? I'm conscious. I live in Aylesbury, so East West Rail is a railway that passes past me. If I didn't live in Aylesbury, would I have heard of East West Rail before? I'm not quite sure. It's an interesting subject because when I speak to people about it, some people have heard about it, some people haven't. I think it's getting shadowed by HS2 really, because it does share some of the, there is an intersection point, or they do cross each other at some point, HS2 being very forefront in news, etc. But before I go any further, I want you to think about this. I'm going to ask a question. If you had the opportunity to build a new rail from scratch, what approaches would you take and what considerations would you embed from the start? It's an interesting question because it'll depend on which, what your role is and what you do. So what I want you to think about, don't worry, I'm not going to pull anyone out and put you on the spot and talk about it, but I want you to think about your current role or your commute to work, how you get to work, and ask yourself some of these questions and other questions if you want. So my job commute would be so much easier if I could, oh, that doesn't make sense, does it? Or my journey could be a lot more efficient if I wouldn't have these issues, if getting to where I need to be would be much better, if I could make much more informed decisions, if. The reason I'm asking them questions is because they're the sort of questions that we ask ourselves as engineering, and I'll cover that later on when we revisit them. But for example, if from a renewals perspective, you work in renewals, you're a project engineer, you're writing documents, you're doing X, Y, Z, and half the time you're thinking, why did I do that? Is anyone even looking at that? Is there things that I'm doing within my job that seem to not be adding any value to the end objective that we're trying to meet? You could say that spending 3 days doing a risk assessment or a FAMICA or something silly, not silly, but something like that, and think, why have I started this from scratch? There's got to be ways of improving this process. How could I have made this process a bit quicker, a little bit more efficient? Think of that. If you're a maintainer, my job would be so much easier if, you could think about access, time, competence. What does it add value? How do I get to where I'm going? Them sort of questions. From an operator perspective, thinking about reliability and just ops in general, think about access again, access being a big one. How could I make reaction times a bit quicker to service affecting failures? If you're a commuter, thinking about things like what can make my journey a lot more easier. There's plenty of times I've been around London and you get to an interchange station and on the map it looks like it's about 3 seconds away from where you get off the train, but then you've had to walk 15, 20 minutes to get to another platform. Or you could be pulling up in a car park and it takes you about 20 minutes to get to the platform. What could we do to make them things a little bit more efficient, better for the customer? And obviously, from an environmental perspective or earthworks perspective, you can think, where am I going to build a rail? What is, we know such a derailment that's happened recently. What can I do to make my earthworks more efficient or more sustainable for the rest of the end of life, pretty much, yeah. From environmental, less of an eyesore, quieter. Am I cutting communities in half? Would this make my job easier? Would this make me have better decisions? But that's what I want you to think about as we're going through this, and I'll go through a bit more at the end. Right, to East-West Rail. So as Michael said earlier on, it is a connection between Oxford and Cambridge. It's on this thing we call the arc. It's important. It's got a lot of prosperity. You look at cities like Oxford itself with its education, internationally recognised education, and Cambridge, and all the innovation that's going through places like Milton Keynes. It's definitely a railway that would serve a great purpose to the community and the businesses that it serves. Pretty much as Michael said, you can't really get from one to the other without driving or going via London. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make it cheaper and quicker to get around the area, connecting people to their jobs, homes and families, as well as businesses to their employees, suppliers and customers. That aside, there's also a lot of housing schemes going on, or proposed housing schemes. So what we want to do is support these housing schemes to make it more affordable, help money go forward. People can afford to live and work and travel to work across these areas without having to go via London or drive. which is a modal shift of transport, which adds towards CO2 emissions and all that sort of stuff. We want to improve quality of life for people in the area, having that transport links. I know it's difficult. I've got friends in Milton Keynes. I actually go to the ice hockey in Milton Keynes from Aylesbury, but currently I can't get there on the train. I've got to drive, which means I can't have a beer and enjoy the sport I love. So it's going to improve my life quite significantly, which is why I'm keen to get it going. Attracting talent and people and new technology and growth, and supporting the economy and spreading prosperity across the UK. The National Infrastructure Commission estimated that creating the transport links and supporting the area between Oxford and Cambridge is worth about 80 billion extra each year for the British economy. So there's definitely a very good case for this railway. So this is what it looks like in schematic form. So as you can see, there's 3 different colours on there. I'll go through what they are and the delivery method for each as I go through the presentation. But this just gives you an idea of what East West Rail is going to look like. So anyone familiar with the area will understand its benefits. So there was Oxford all the way through to Milton Keynes, up to all the way through to Cambridge, and then Aylesbury up to Milton Keynes. So you see these lines intersecting the East West Rail network. These are all the interconnectivity, all the lines that pass through the railway, which just shows you that the additional benefit of getting people around or commuting from areas which you might not have ever heard of before. I mean, before I started, I live in Aylesbury. I'd never heard of Woburn Sands before, Ridgemont. I'd never heard of St Neots or Sandy. I'd never heard of these places. But these people live there, and people want to commute and on a cleaner, more quick mode of transport, and the opportunity is going to be developed as part of the scheme. So you see it crosses the West Coast Main Line, the East Coast Main Line, it connects to Anglia and Norfolk, it goes out western towards Reading from Oxford. You can get into a lot of the main London hubs from some of the intersection points on here, and the dotted line that intersects between Bicester Village and Winslow should be around that junction. That is what HS2 is going to be. One of the funny things about it, I think back, is that we always talk about it Oxford to Cambridge, but that's actually west-east. It's not east-west. So it should really be called the West East Railway Company that are delivering it. And then the acronym there's actually WERC, which is Wake, which is the Scout and Manc way of saying going to work, which is exactly what it is. So I'm happy with that. Right. So this is just a little bit of understanding, getting an idea of how big the thing is. So the Oxford to Bicester Village, which is the red bit on the side there, it's about 12 miles. Bicester Village to Claydon Junction, which is the junction just before Winslow there. That one is 7 miles. Aylesbury to Claydon Junction, so that's the bit that comes up from the bottom from Aylesbury Rail Parkway up to Winslow. That is 11 miles. Claydon Junction to Bletchley, which is the one just below Milton Keynes. That's about 13 miles. Bletchley to Milton Keynes is a short one, you could probably walk it. Bletchley to Bedford, 16 miles, and then the Bedford to Cambridge is approximately 32 miles. Not very good quick at maths, but it's about 96 miles altogether. So this is a story about this bit. So Oxford to Bicester Village was completed in December 2016. So part of this railway already exists. Part of it is a mothballed section, which is part of the beaching, and some of it's new. So I'll tell you about these sections as we go through it. So it was completed in 2016. So a major upgrade of the existing line between Oxford and Bicester to facilitate future East-West rail services. So Bicester Village is that key end point for that. It involved building a new 1 kilometre section of railway to connect the former Bicester town station, which is now called Bicester Village, to Oxford, and it's operated by Chiltern. That is currently managed and maintained by Network Rail. That's why Network Rail is in the top corner. Let's have a look at some of the shiny new stations. There you go, look at that. Yeah, this is some of the good work that was being developed at the stations. Good stations, if anyone's ever been them before. You can tell it's been thought about, it looks good. Yeah, and it's got all the different languages on the signs, which is good to see for the amount of people that come up to Bicester Village. If you've never been to Bicester Village, don't ever say yes to your missus when she invites you to go there, because it's an experience. Here's Oxford Parkway. You see it's got a similar theme. It looks good. Yeah, that's another station that's been developed as part of that. The next bit is Bicester to Bletchley and Milton Keynes. So this phase will reinstate and upgrade old railway lines, allowing for new train services to run between Oxford, Bletchley and Milton Keynes. One of the key challenges, one of the big bits of work in there was Bletchley Viaduct, which goes over the West Coast Main Line. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. It's been upgraded and modernised, and yeah, it looks good. And some of the areas where it used to be a railway, particularly around through Winslow, because Winslow's getting a new station. This is all like mothballed old style railway that used to be there. Currently, it was just a forest with loads of trees and a muddy path. But yeah, that's it. It's being delivered by the East West Rail Alliance. That is not East West Rail Company, who I work for. It is an alliance between Atkins, Lane O'Rourke Network Rail and Volker Rail. So they are doing all the enabling works, and they've started doing all the enabling works, and the work's cracking on as we speak. What else can I tell you about this? East West Rail will be the operator at this point. 2 trains an hour between Oxford and Milton Keynes, and possibly 1 train an hour between Aylesbury and Milton Keynes. I say that because there's questions around the business case for this. There's definitely a business case for it, but it's quite a challenging. It's currently a single line railway from Aylesbury Vale Parkway up to Claydon Junction. It's freight only route, so there's lots of technical issues such as structures and stuff, where if we want to achieve the timetable that we have concept for, then there's lots of work that needs to be done there. A lot of thought needs to go into that. So there's a nice picture of Bletchley Viaduct being built. This picture was taken by a drone. Anyone who likes a bit of modern technology, there you go. So as you can see there, they're just across the West Coast Main Line, they're building it in sections as it goes across. There's a picture from a different angle. Nice bit of civil construction work going on there for the civil engineers in the room. Good bit of work, all shiny and new, happy days. And this joins into Bletchley High Level Station. So the picture June 2020 is one of the sections what it looked like before the East West Rail Alliance started doing any work. And the picture from July 2020 shows you the vegetation clearance that's actually started to enable the project to roll forward. Yep, that's that one. Next bit, Bletchley to Bedford. This is actually going to be delivered by us, the East West Rail Company. It is a current railway. It's the Marston Vale line, for anyone who might be familiar to it. It needs considerable upgrade to achieve what we're trying to achieve as far as trains per hour and line speed. The next slide tells you a little bit more about what that railway currently is. It'll be operated by East West Rail. We're looking at 2 trains per hour between Oxford and Milton Keynes, plus 2 trains an hour between Oxford and Bedford. So that's the Marston Vale line today. It's about 16.75 miles, say 17 miles. It's got 10 stations on it. It takes ages to get along it because it's relatively slow. The average speed 24 miles an hour. Roughly an hour service, we'll say that, because it's exactly that. There's no service on a Sunday, and obviously one of the biggest challenges for us is that there's 34 level crossings on that route. So we need to think carefully and obviously remove as many of them as reasonably possible. if not all of them. The main technical issues from a permanent way perspective is the single line track at either side of it. That is clearly not good enough to operate a modern railway that we're looking at up in the line speed to 100 mile an hour. So we need to think about making that bigger so that it can accommodate the train service. I'm yet to have a ride along it. I've got all intentions to have a ride along it because I'm being told it's quite an interesting patch. But yeah, when I find the time between juggling between baby food and dog food, I'll give it a go. So this is the big cheese, the big bit, the bit that I'm more heavily involved with. Is being delivered by East West Rail. I'll tell you a little bit more about the company and its links to the other organisations as we move on to the next few slides. But this is what it is. So this bit's a completely greenfield site, and it's going to be delivered by East West Rail Company. The operational concept is 2 trains an hour between Oxford and Milton Keynes, plus 2 trains per hour between Oxford and Cambridge, extending the previous Oxford to Bedford service, plus 2 trains an hour between Bletchley and Cambridge. But it's a greenfield site, it's currently just fields. Yeah, interesting. So this is where the interest from people who have not been involved with the early concept of a railway is how do you go about deciding where the railway is going to go? And what are the decision-making criteria that goes into that? Very interesting. So to give us a little bit more butter to it, East West Rail Company consulted on 5 route options in 2019, so last year. And that was through a public consultation, and it talked to a certain area of corridors, which I'll move on in a minute. And the preferred route option was announced, so it has been announced, so we know what the corridor is. So these were the route options. So this is the shiny new bit. In fact, let's get some involvement. So you're sitting there listening to my drony Geordie voice. Just as a finger in the air, if you want to engage, you don't have to. In the chat bar, it'd be interesting to see, just as a finger in the air, stab in the dark, which option you think was chosen. I'm not going to say I'll not pull any out. I'll not ask you any questions, but it'd be interesting to see if anybody's got any anything to say. So the Bud and Track engineer is quietly saying to him or herself now, don't choose option C or option D because it's much wigglier than the rest of them. However, most of the people are saying that this is an impossible task to choose now because we don't know enough about it. So the red one, the red one, the red one, the red one. And that's exactly what I've wrote down here as a response from everyone who's in track. So Dan Mahoney, Mr. Track Tech, is exactly what you said, Mike Baller, exactly what you said. Yeah, I think the operators are probably saying that as well because it's a quick one. Because you could build almost a straight line between point A and point B. But there's people sitting back now going, I can't do this. I can't answer your question. It's impossible to stab in the dark without knowing what the land topo is like, what the geology is like, where there's any ancient woodland or where there's floodplains, where the communities currently are. Does it separate any communities? What is this corridor? I can't choose this corridor. But people will always have opposing opinions as well. There'll be people, as you can see on some of the options in Bassingbourn, who might miss out an opportunity if Route B and E is selected. But again, there's probably people in Bassingbourn who think, I don't want to commute. I don't want a railway running past my house. It's it's a pretty tough decision. So a lot of work went into this route options, just to enforce the message that this is a corridor. It's not an alignment. Therefore, the railway will fit somewhere within them coloured marks. But a lot of work went into it, and finally, a route option was selected. Did anybody get it right? No. You can tell none of you live in any of these locations. All right. So, Route E was selected. So this is a geographical picture of what Route E looks like. So this is the corridor that's been selected after the public consultation. So that's the bit that we're working with now. So you see it comes out north of Bedford, goes through a wide patch of St. Neots sandy area, narrows in towards Camborne, and comes out and then joins Cambridge from the south. Yeah, so there will be new stations built within this length. The Camborne one cutting like East Coast Main Line access, Bedford and Midland Main Line, and the Shepworth branch coming into Cambridge. These are all interconnectivity areas of it. So that was the option that was selected, and these are the reason why it was selected. It delivers the best value for money. It was the most popular option, and it delivers the best opportunities for the environment. Yeah, so that's why it was selected. As I say, if you wanted to know anything more about that public consultation or get any information about some of the things that went into it, you head over to the East West Rail Company website, and there's lots of information on there that'll give you a little bit more source to the decision making. I just put this slide in so you can see where the connections are. Make sure I haven't missed anything. So yeah, there's lots of challenges in here. For example, if I go back to this, say how do we leave Bedford, and what is the effect on the Midland Main Line and the rest of the East West Rail? So as we come into Bedford and leave Bedford, the challenge is what do we do, because Bedford has the Midland Main Line running through it. We're not going to go over it. We're not going to go under it. Or do we? Or don't we? Don't know. These are all these options that we consider that are in people's minds. Do we join the Midland Main Line and then leave it again? Which is obviously a challenge for those of you who are in the mind of maintenance and operations, because then you're relying on the reliability of somebody else's railway or another railway to meet your performance targets. Do we make more? Do we run our track alongside the Midland Main Line? But think about, these are the people live here. This land belongs to people. Does this adding extra railway involve people's property? Does it take the railway closer to people's property? It's a challenge, something that we have lots of discussions about. How do we join towards Cambridge, and what is the effect on the Shepworth branch? So you'll see coming south of Cambridge in that area, how do we join there? There's an existing railway. Do we, again, same questions, do we join the existing railway to join up to Cambridge? How do we join the existing railway? Do we, if we've got a double track railway, do we put a double junction in there? Do we build a bridge, a flyover? What's the ground conditions like? Are we high at that point there? Are we low? What is the land take requirements? Lots and lots of questions and challenges coming in there. As the railway crosses some of the other railways, such as the East Coast Main Line, do we go over it? Do we go under it? If we go over it, go build a bridge. If we go under it, dig a tunnel, or an underpass. How does that affect the East Coast Main Line? Are we doing the right thing? Can I get a straight line cutting across it so that we cross at a 90-degree angle rather than having skewed infrastructure going across? Lots and lots of challenges that us as engineers have got to figure out when it comes to the next stage. And the next stage is the route alignment. So within that corridor, go back, we need to connect the dots together between Bedford and Cambridge. And yeah, potentially it could look like this, couldn't it? Yeah, where do we go? What do we do? It wiggles about all over the place. But let's say it's up to us. We're looking at it holistically. We're looking at it from different options. We're looking at it from a land take perspective. We look at it from a geographical perspective, a geology perspective. We look at it from an environmental perspective, much as anything else, because of floodplains, the current land levels, how it lies, the cut and fill ratio, how does that match up? There's lots and lots of consideration, lots of factors go into it, as well as obviously the elements that we don't discuss or is not normally discussed at this, you don't really hear about, is the maintainability element of it. It is all right going as wiggly, wiggly, wiggly to avoid all the obstacles, but your maintainability element of it gets challenged by that. Obviously, from a track perspective or a permanent weight perspective, curvature and the geometry through curves, transitions, where the S and C could be, all these things have a massive effect on your rail maintenance regimes, as we all know and we're all aware of, us maintainers. So we have to think about lots and lots of different things, and obviously preparing for climate change is another thing. Is what's the water levels likely to be? What's the floodplains likely to look like in 25, 30, 50 years' time? And also, how are we going to renew it in 50, 120 years' time, depending on what assets we're looking at. Lots and lots of considerations going into that. So we are currently working through that process. And that's what I spend most of my time thinking about. So this is the route to actual construction for it all. So you see stage one was choosing the preferred route option. So we went through that earlier on. So we had a non-statutory public consultation taken with people living around the route on the corridor. And that's how that route option was determined. We're developing route alignment options now. So we're designing and testing possible route alignments. We're doing a land surveying to understand what that means from a up and down, left and right land take perspective. And we are going to enter something called a non-statutory public consultation, which is we take our developing route alignments into public consultation and make sure we get the input from that. One of the key things you'll learn for when I introduce what East West Rail Company is being the customer and understanding the term customer. Customer is not just a passenger. For those of you who might be thinking in that mind, it's anyone who's going to be the maintainers a customer, the operators a customer, the communities are customers. Everybody who has an interest in the railway is potentially a customer. So we need to think about it, and that's what we're doing, is leading from that perspective and making sure we take into account everything we can. And one of the most important ways of doing that is by actually talking to people who could be affected by the railway. Once we get to the next point is we'll choose a preferred route alignment. That's the stage where we would consider all them assessment factors for the railway. And as I said before, the maintainability elements of it, the cut and fill, the cost, the land take, how many bridges are there going to be, how many viaducts are there going to be, how many embankments, how many cuttings, does it all work out? What is the best route based on the information that we're doing? Obviously, there's quite a lot of information that goes into that. So another thing that's going to give us that preferred route alignment is the fact that the non-stop public consultation will help us aim towards or driving the value of being the customer. So that's what we're doing now. So we're working close with our design colleagues who are putting together all the information ready for these things. The next stage is then securing development consent. So, I mean, this would be interesting to people who've never looked at it from this perspective before, as in where we have to then make a proposal to get a development consent order, it's called. So that is when once we chose the preferred alignment, we fill it full of the information we need. We become very sure of what we want and what we're looking to take, or looking at what we need to build the railway, the space provision, looking at all the assessment, making sure that we've dotted all the T's and crossed all the T's and dotted the I's. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. And then that goes into a period where the government really decide whether we get the consent to go forward. And then once that consent is been given, construction begins. And remember, we're still talking specifically about that Bedford to Cambridge bit. So that's my life at the minute. I'm in this cycle somewhere, and I'm developing bits and pieces of that. But I say I'll cover some of the more engineering-y things when I talk about engineering. Right, so who are the East West Railway Company? So East West Rail Company was established by the Department for Transport in December 2017. So we were established to drive forward the work being led by Network Rail or the Alliance to reinstate the railway from Bicester to Bletchley, Milton Keynes and Bedford. So it's more of a oversight relationship where we ensure that the delivery is coming on time, and then we have that commitment on top of it. I've dealt with some non-compliant reports or some entry into service questions and stuff there, but other than that, I personally, as an engineer, I tend not to get involved unless it's to do with requirements or specifications. Take responsibility for developing the case for the section of the railway between Oxford and Cambridge. I think we've already gone through some of the main benefits of that. It's supported by local businesses. We've got a lot of support from local businesses, and obviously the public consultations will determine how successful these cases are put forward. And we're here to deliver East West Rail differently. So we're not Network Rail, we're a different client organisation. We are looking at the railway from a whole life perspective. We're not just building a railway. We are thinking about how it's going to be used, how it's going to be maintained, how it's going to be renewed. We're going that far out when we're thinking about strategies. So we build infrastructure which supports local and national strategies for the region, safely deliver infrastructure as quickly and cost effectively as possible. So we're looking at where, how can we speed processes up? We could be looking at things like GRIP, or how do we manage the project management side of things as the project as it goes through. Do we follow GRIP? Do we not? We get to challenge and be different in that respect if it's the right thing to do. So there's a lot of things being thought about from that perspective. Explore new ways to fund and finance the infrastructure, explore improved ways of working across the rail industry. So we get a chance, although it's been for a small amount of time during this development phase, as we get to think about how are we actually going to deliver the railway. How can we deliver the railway to make it better for people working on the railway in the future, people building the railway? Is there modern techniques that we can adopt? Are there new standards we can follow? We can pick and choose these things, but obviously it's a risk of picking new things, and there's lots of things to think about. But I say one of the key things is to make sure that you get any assurance body or anybody who's going to be part of this or of the handover and the regulatory side of things, is getting them involved early, so that we can go through these things and get the right things in place ready for that stage way in the future. Design integrated infrastructure and train services so passengers get a better experience. So those of you who work on the railway who've seen things like a ROC, a route operations centre, or an integrated control centres, or ops and maintenance working together, this is a key thing for us. Obviously, if the maintenance model will be dependent on that, but we can always build in strategies that enable this to happen, to make sure that the operator and the maintainer are as closely knitted together as possible, so that you get better reaction times, you get a much more informed decision making to get passengers, give them a better experience, not just passengers but customers as well. Ensure the new railway meets the needs of the communities. So that's a key one, and it says during and after the build. So we have to take into consideration that during the build this is actually going to be quite disruptive. How disruptive? I don't know. Let's talk about it. What can we do to reduce the disruption as we go through that part of the process? Other things that we're thinking about. So, role of engineering. So that's what we do now. So this is just a slide going through what we do as engineers as part of East West Rail as a client organisation. So these are the circles are the four main things that we get involved with. So we are the technical authority. That means we sign certificates to say that these things are technically okay. So we set requirements for the technical sides of the railway, and we assure against them requirements to make sure that everything's been done as it should be, or as we propose it to do. It's a equivalent role from a project engineer, I'd imagine, and central engineering and TfL or Network Rail. Also the asset management. let me stick on the end of that digital engineering. I'll go through a bit more when we start thinking about the words on the other side of the screen in a minute. But asset maintenance, we've got to think about that. As I've said previously, we're thinking about how is it going to be maintained. I know I'm a track engineer, but I'm also thinking about it from a signaling perspective. What signaling system we're going to use, what competencies are required, that what are the tasks associated with that, how can I build that into my concepts for approaches and designs. Overhead line as well, although the railway, it's still a question in the air, is it going to be electrified? With all the modern battery powers and hydrogen cells that you hear floating around, are we going to be the first railway to really adopt that all the way through? Is the technology going to be right for the purpose of the operation? So we need to think about that as well. Some of it could potentially be new and novel, so we need to be aware of any new and novel stuff coming in, because there will lessons learned and competence comes into it, which is why technical capability is there. So we are responsible for we need to make sure that we have the technical capability within our engineering function, within our team, to make sure that we cover all the subjects associated with the other three circles. So yeah, from a signalling maintenance perspective, we need someone who knows lots about signalling maintenance. I know a bit from past experience, but I'm not a signalling engineer. So we need that capability. But let's go across and now to pull out some of these words and have a little discussion about that. So we've got big one, technical requirements. That's obviously our key role. So we are writing documents and strategies to aim towards setting technical requirements. Obviously, during concept stages, there's assumptions that are made. And these assumptions are proven through the design stages as the design matures. Are the assumptions ruled out, or are they turned into actual technical requirements for the route? We're doing that side of things. When it comes to validation and verification, we need to start thinking about how we're going to do that at each stage. As you heard during the presentation, there's different stages of implementation of what the work's going to be. There's different stages across East West Rail. How are we going to verify and validate each bit as it comes through? Strategies, that's one of the key things I'm doing at the minute, is get involved with strategies for asset maintenance and asset management, because of my previous experience. But we're right, like I've wrote the asset maintenance strategy, which it says what you think it might say, as far as what strategies would you put in place for maintenance, such as reactive, preventive, predictive, all these lovely terms. Anyone works on network rail, it's similar, or it could align with maintenance for performance, which you're going through. But yeah, condition-based maintenance, you hear all these terms, but what does it actually mean? So the strategy goes through what these things are and pretty much tells people the decision-making criteria, the objectives and the principles that should be applied to these things. Once the strategy is in place, then we can start thinking about lower level documents or other documents that contain requirements, specifications, operation and maintenance manuals, supplier recommendations, tender opportunity. We go through all that sort of information as we get into the lower documents, and then we obviously can set up processes and procedures to follow once handover is achieved, regardless to who the maintainer might be at the end. Asset management, I mentioned digital engineering before, but we are looking at network rail. We recognise the term intelligent infrastructure. We're looking at that sort of thing as well. So we are thinking, what can we embed during the design or construction stage that could be used to monitor assets as we go through and eventually hand over the maintenance? What does it mean? How does it look? We have opportunities for thinking about how asset breakdown structures are actually set up. So if you imagine Ellipse and Maximo, how granular is the asset information? Are assets easy to identify? Are they easy to find? Or is the right data put against these assets to make them easier to bring them all out and look at the cost and look at the money we're spending on things, look at what we're doing, and also linking it to condition data and what does that mean? Where my experience in the past with the lifts, people are managed by a lift rather than managing it. My experience with Maximo is similar, other than with Rail for London, where they had the opportunity to go through all this. It's getting that bit right and really defining the data requirements that we can finally turn into knowledge. But it's also looking at how we can represent the data. So we could have lots of assets. How do we look at them? Can we visualize them? So that's where this digital twin concept comes in, and also visualization platforms for different things, to be specified, really. But the digital twin is the concept of having a digital version of the railway, and you can zoom in on it, you can go around it, you can fly through it. It's telling you live information from them things that can capture information live. You can add asset condition to assets, and it can be visualized in these environments. You can model and simulate through a digital twin for planning and scheduling that. So these are, although it doesn't exist, we are thinking about these things and how it all comes together, and obviously thinking about the national incentive for BIM principles and stuff like that, and how it all links to the national digital twin, thinking about all that. Reliability, availability, maintainability, safety, this RAMS concept that some people might never have heard of before. We didn't really understand that. What does it mean to us? It's interesting to think, if we go back to the questions at the start, one of the questions was, oh, my life would be much easier if I was a maintainer. You know, how many times have I got sent to a job and it's took us an hour and a half to get there, and I had to set up my safe system aware, I had to test my safe system aware, I had to verify it, sign it off, then I had to do the job, unload the van, do the job, and then hand the track back. By the end of that, it's took me 3 hours in a service effect and failure environment. That's unacceptable from a performance perspective. So how do I really build in reliability into my infrastructure? If anyone understands reliability, one of the key things you do for reliability is build in redundancy. So now you think about concepts. If I've got a 2-track railway, if I've built a 4-track railway, I'll always have 2 railway lines I can use and 2 railway lines I can maintain. Obviously, that's a massive amount of land take. It's ridiculous cost for the sake of what it actually achieves. So that's not really a concept you would follow, but thinking of it from that perspective. It's a freight use line as well. It's not just passenger trains. So as freight come through relatively, it could be a slower speed. How do we make sure that they can get out the way for passenger trains to go through to maintain that performance for the passenger trains? Are we going to start building passing loops, for example, into things? But then again, you look at it from a PWI perspective, you think, well, that introduces more S&C. Another thing from a maintenance perspective is, if I had a walkway all the way through, I had access to my railway strategically, I had my depot facilities in places where I can get access to the railway quickly, I can get there without disrupting traffic. Would I build that in the design? So having a no limited clearances assumption or requirement is actually it's a good place to start to achieving all that. And widening the infrastructure, thinking about renewals, making sure you're enabling every part of the new build infrastructure to be accessible from high output equipment and doing these things. Lots and lots of things going with it. I could talk all day about it. I need a drink because I'm sick of talking. No, I'm not sick of talking about it. But yeah, we go, I'm having a drink. Happy days. Yeah, so it's a big role, and that's what we're doing. Trying to get it all in within the concept stage is hard, because the time ticks by faster than you think. But we need to get things right or embedded at least into the route option alignment sort of scenario assessment factors to ensure that all these things are optimized and that it's the best for the customer. And I'd say the customer are all these people: it's the asset manager, the asset maintainer, it's the operator. But yeah, so that's me, and that's the engineering, and that's East West Rail. I will now move on to a question and answer session.
Any questions you've got into the chat function? I've got 1 or 2 to start with for you, Peter. First one, have you got any lessons learned so far?
Lessons learned so far. I think the main thing from a lessons learned perspective is, because it's a new organisation, is getting getting the organisation right to make sure that we respond to things that we need to respond to. It's we're an engineering department, we've got an ops department, we've got all these different connections to East West Rail Alliance, and really understanding that relationship. I think one of the key lessons learned for me is that having that properly defined and in place and structured, so that nothing goes amiss and nothing takes longer than it needs to. I think that in this case, I think that's one of the key lessons learned, and also getting involved early with some of the design of some of the bridges, Bletchley flyover, or entry into service characteristics from some of the other bits of the railway. There was opportunities to probably speed up the process that might not have been taken, but it's something that we take forward and lesson learned for the other stages of the project.
All right. Next question I've got is: have you been able to look back at any other new build railways for any lessons learned?
Yeah, well, I was involved with the Rail for London. Obviously, we were taken over from Crossrail, so there was a lot of things that Crossrail did or didn't do, which is everyone knows about it, that are dragging through. I think if we thought about one of the main lessons learned, and there's a few people on the call who will understand what I'm saying, is the balance between new and novel, and things that we need. I mean, from a maintainability perspective, it's quite challenging to adopt something that's completely new and novel, because you haven't got any real failure data. You don't know how it's going to respond. As a maintainer, you weren't involved with the design stages, which is the way that you would achieve a little bit more standardization to our route firing. If you look at stuff like pattern recognition or video inspection, having a railway that's got common components relative throughout, you're giving yourself a much better opportunity to embrace this technology and make it successful really quickly. But I think the key thing that I learned from Crossrail, from that project, was the importance of inspection and maintenance during construction, testing and commissioning. Obviously, they would have set up an organisation to look after the railway prior to handover, which was meant to be in 2018. 2 years later, that's the same organisation. They were not expecting to have to look at the railway in that amount of detail for that amount of time. I think there was a few errors that led to a few instances where intervention was required. I mean, we did some verification surveys on Crossrail, and there's work that was outstanding that could have been done from the onset. And I think if a proper maintenance organisation or a proper maintenance regime, let's not say proper because it's detriment to them, but if a more rigorous or a more common understanding of what infant mortality means and what could happen, maybe that organisation could have been a little bit more prepared for what was about to come. Does that answer your question?
Okay, I've got a question. Yeah. What question from Mike Barlow saying, will the new greenfield section of East West Rail be built with wide 6 foots and bidirectional signalling to facilitate adjacent line open working for future maintenance?
From a perspective that we haven't gone out of consultation yet, I can't officially answer that question. However, when we talk about maintenance strategies, and we talk about reliability, and we talk about enabling the best use of the biggest machines, ballast cleaners and stuff like that, and we talk about even adjacent, like any line open methodology, how close you get when you get to a narrower 6 foot, widening that is definitely something that is on the table and is being discussed and has been thought about in enough detail to progress it as an assessment factor for the cross-section work that we do as part of the design.
Okay. Are there any more questions from anybody? Okay, there's no more questions coming through. Can I invite Mike Barlow to give our vote of thanks?
So, Peter, thanks very much for your excellent talk on a project which I regard as very, very interesting. The only thing wrong with the project is it's the wrong side of London to where I live, because I'd actually love to work on it, but hey ho.
No, the only permanent wage job's mine, so unfortunately you can't anyway, so just stay where you are, yeah?
Yeah, all right, for now. Peter's taken us through what East West Railway is in terms of an organisation. He's looked at the company and he's explained his role in engineering. I've been trying to get someone to give a talk on East West Railway for quite a few years now, so it was worth putting you in that headlock, Peter, to get you to give the talk that you've done tonight. So thank you again. You made the comment early on about not many people may have heard of East West Rail. I've certainly heard of it because, as I said, I think it's very interesting. But I think also it doesn't seem, for some reason, to attract a lot of the public antagonism that HS2 does. So that to me is an interesting differentiation between the two projects.
Yeah.
You put an interesting list of questions. I'm talking. You put an interesting list of questions at the start. Loads of factors to consider. Access, the perennial one, so obviously affects mass transit systems like the Underground, where I work, and will affect Crossrail in the future as well. One of the factors that you very astutely pointed out is looking at who the customers are, and you explained that that's a very wide range of people and organisations. East West Rail is obviously intended to achieve many things. Some of those things are not complementary with each other, so that adds another dimension to the challenges. But it is designed to support development. Part of that is going to be through the good connectivity with the existing lines, and of course it's an environmentally friendly transport system, and we need more of those given the way the world's going at the moment. Oh, excuse me. It's interesting. It presents another interesting set of challenges. Is of course that it's a combination of open lines, mothballed lines, and greenfield sites. So loads of different factors to work with and consider. It's very good to hear that maintainability is one of the things that's being considered, because I'm sure you've come across it. I've come across it as well, where the poor maintainer has been handed something rather than being asked what the maintainer would like to have. Operability is also a factor. There are examples around the country of railways that have been built and have been outstanding successes. Docklands Light Railway, one in London. Borders Railway in Scotland is another example. So perhaps there also needs to be a consideration to provide for future capacity enhancements for when East West Rail is built and proves to be the stunning success that it surely will be. So I hope funding is found. I hope that the project goes ahead. And on that note, I shall close and ask everyone present to unmute their microphones and join me in a round of applause to thank Peter for this evening.